Hello there, this is Alan English, actor, writer and autism trainer with another autism tutorial, this time on home and family life. This includes some biographical information along with some more general information. Now, to begin with, I must say that for me, I was very fortunate in that at home, when I was growing up, I was very well looked after. I was comfortable, clean and well fed. I had a lot of luxuries such as videos, computer games and action figures. I count myself very lucky in these respects. A lot of people, don't have these, didn't grow up with these things. I watched a lot of TV shows, like Batman and the A-Team. I loved and often imitated the comical, cartoon staged violence of these shows, and I got it in my head I could be a superhero and fight crime and get the girl the way these characters did in these shows. It's childish and ridiculous, of course it is, but I genuinely believe this. Sports-wise, I was fond of playing golf and snooker, mainly because these were games that you could play on your own and you didn't have to interact with team members. I also liked show jumping, and while I didn't have access to a horse, I did have a back garden, and in it I built a show jumping course from items that I built, building the obstacles from items that I found around the house. I also imitated character voices and did sports commentary to myself. Like many autistic people, I used my environment around me to create my own reality, and this caused problems as I grew up. Now, of my two parents, my mother was the primary caregiver. Now, if you're following these videos in sequence, you'll be hearing from my mother a little later on. Now, my mother was always warm, loving, and very committed as a parent. She could also be very sharp, disciplined, and really keep me in line. It was from her that I got my sense of values and my sense of right and wrong. I learnt a lot of hard lessons from her, such as, you can't always get your own way, you can't buy friendship, and you've got to stick it out sometimes. These were lessons that had been drummed into her, which in turn she drummed into me. She was always on it, pushing, cajoling, making sure I was saying the right thing and doing the right thing. My mother has always had, and still, at the age of 72, she still has a very busy personality. It's just her. She was quick to correct any rude or socially inappropriate behaviour on my part. This is another thing I thank her for. But as I got older, I found this invasive, and my mum, being aware of my condition, found it very hard to let me grow and make my own mistakes. I think that's hard for any parent to do, but I think for her it was just that little bit more difficult. My mother was always wondering where my autism came from in the family, and I have to say, and you'll see this in later on in the video I put into this playlist, it's taken a while for us to reconcile ourselves into accepting my condition. Now, by contrast, my father was a much quieter man, and he took a lot longer to get to know, well, a little longer to get to know. During my early years, he was often working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and he would come home angry and stressed. And in these moods, he was very quick to lash out verbally and sometimes even physically at the slightest provocation. After one such episode, I was only young at the time, let's say about maybe 3, maybe 4, my mother took him into the front room and told him to wise up, change his behaviour, control himself, or else. He was a lot calmer after that, and I came to appreciate the kind of guidance and wisdom that he had to offer as a parent. My father taught me how to read using newspaper headlines, and in turn I helped him out with the odd jobs he started doing for other people, neighbours and people in the community. And we spent many evenings watching Star Trek: The Next Generation together. This sort of thing brought us closer together. When I started doing theatre with the Aberdeen Gang Show, I talked him into joining the stage crew where his technical and his handyman skills could come in useful. My parents had experience in their lives not so much with autism, but with the mental health difficulties that frequently go hand in hand with it. Now, both of them had family members who had experienced mental health problems, and they brought this experience and that patience and understanding into bringing me up. I wasn't an only child. I have a sister who is 2 years younger than I am. Doesn't feel like much these days, but when you're young, 2 years is a huge difference. Now, my sister is exceptionally smart and definitely not autistic. It took a while amid the usual sibling scuffles to accept that she was, in many ways, a far more able person than I was. And when this happened, we got along much better. Kids at school often pointed up the differences between us, by coming up and saying to me, you know, how come you're like weird and your sister's like normal? My sister just being as she is. She was just a lot easier for the other kids to relate to, I suppose. Now, location-wise, I grew up in Aberdeen, which is a cold, huge grey granite village on the north-east coast of Scotland. But I much preferred my ancestral home of Glasgow, where a family would spend the odd weekend with my grandfather and other family members. And on the way home, I would frequently bawl my eyes out crying when we had to go back to Aberdeen. Now, with this relatively comfortable family life, my problems kind of interacting with the world really began when I stepped out the front door. And for a while, it's ironic in a way, but I blamed my family for a while for making me soft in a world that was hard and rough. At least that's how I perceived it to be. Now, this was nonsense, of course, but I only came to realise this, later on. No family can cure or parent a child's autism out of them, but a supportive family unit is a huge help to an autistic person, and sadly, this doesn't always happen. You can see it in the news today. Now, while I'm no parenting expert, I do know, just from being around, not just my parents, but parents of other kids, that raising a child, any child, is hard work. Much more so when that child is autistic, with all the challenges that poses. With all these challenges, it's very easy for families of autistic kids to fall into cycles of abuse that sometimes end in suicide and even murder. The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network in the United States has documented many such cases. And a few years ago, as a performer, I co-performed a piece called Don't Mourn for Us. Don't Mourn for Us. This was written by an autistic man for the parents of autistic children, and its message was quite simple. Accept us and raise us as we are, not how you would have liked us to be. This can be, and often is, a very hard thing to do. It's not impossible, but it is very difficult a lot of the time. Today, however, there is a lot of more information around, for parents of autistic children as well as support, although sadly that's been whittled down through the recession, the cuts that we've had in the past few years. So autistic people and the parents of autistic people do not have to be on their own. They're part of a community now, with the possibilities of sharing ideas and solutions to the individual challenges. So in a lot of ways it's a positive thing. However, at the same time, there are a lot of charlatans out there and snake oil peddlers who try to sell cures for autism, bleach and other chemicals that, when used, can cause lasting harm. So in a way, with this kind of avalanche of new information, parenting an autistic child is as hard as it ever was. However, an understanding and supportive family background can make a huge difference to the lives of autistic people.